Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. And as Kemi Badenoch prepares to work out a theme for her first Conservative Party conference, in order to make sure it's not her last, because she'll also be wanting to head off potential confidence vote later this autumn, she needs a pitch. She needs to provide a vision for how a Conservative government under her leadership would operate. She's correctly stated that she needs to provide a vision of hope, and she thinks she's come up with one. Kemi Badenoch thinks that the way to return to power is to say that what the country needs is more austerity. Yes, she's actually said that. Right then. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So I've made no secret of my frustration at the political naivety of senior politicians across the board these days. In this post-truth world, it's not just that the public are being grievously deceived about what's happening in the political world, but the politicians themselves have decided that they don't need to bother with brains, can just set their mouth flapping and things will work out in the end. The reason why the Conservatives have collapsed in the polls to a level you would not have thought possible, 17% in YouGov, is because they literally broke everything. The party of austerity and Brexit made every public service worse and presided over a cost of living crisis which just got worse and worse. And to top it all, the anti-immigration party produced net migration figure 4 times greater than usual. But whereas austerity was their proud battle cry when they entered government in 2010, the word became a toxic byword for Tory failure by the time they left in 2024. Labour constantly having to insist that there is no austerity with their regime. It's not untrue. Overall public spending is up massively. But even the fact that some individual budgets are seeing real terms cuts, that is off-putting to a lot of voters. Austerity is not popular. In fact, it's a big vote loser. So if you were taking part in a Conservative Party strategy meeting and you were working out how to pitch yourselves as providing a better future than either Labour will or Reform UK could, the last thing you would do is go, do you know what we need? More austerity. In fact, that would be the first idea in the bin. And yet Badenoch has picked it as her grand vision. And not just austerity. Austerity on an extreme scale. Now, she doesn't appear to have used the word austerity itself. It appears she's got just about enough brain to realise the word is toxic. But she said she's going to model herself on Argentina's Javier Milei. Now, Milei is famous for a few things, including swinging the occasional chainsaw around his head, which if Badenoch meant to copy that stunt, I would say, do you know what? She could do worse things. But Badenoch is more interested in Milei's austerity programme. He's slashed public spending, and that's what Badenoch says she wants to emulate. She recently gave an interview where she said she was terrified by levels of government debt. Again, a weird thing to say when it's her Tory government which let it race out of control. And Labour have made it their mission to avoid growing it any further, to actually shrink it a little bit. Now, maybe Badenoch is gambling on that effort failing. But there are 3 main problems with her line here. First, Labour are actively trying to reduce debt as a share of GDP over the course of this parliament, albeit not by much. But Badenoch, you know, the gambit fails completely if they succeed. If they manage to keep a lid on debt after over a decade of the Tories trebling it. Second, if Labour do fail, it won't really be apparent for several more years. The Tories are unlikely to give Badenoch several more years just to see if Labour fail with their efforts. So it's not like she could get a win from this. Third, the public are only bothered about the national debt if they think it's making it harder to fund decent public services, which, you know, it technically is. But if Labour deliver obviously improved services, as they have plans to, well, that's what the public really care about. If I had to identify anything viable about Badenoch's strategy here, it's that she said she's now going to focus on the economy to the exclusion of everything else. That as a general strategy, that would work for a few reasons. First, the Conservatives are always considered by the public the default good ones with the economy. It's a complete lie. Easily exposed if you look through historical data, but voters don't generally like data, so the con works. Second, in opposition, you can always claim that the economy should be better. The United States, Biden delivered very powerful growth, including in real terms incomes. He pumped a lot of investment into key parts of America. Yet, the Democrats lost ultimately on the economy. You can always get people to think it should be better. Third, it helps stop the Tories trying to echo Nigel Farage, one of their biggest strategic mistakes of the past 10 years. Farage leans into culture wars. Badenoch likes doing the same, but she's not very good at it. This economy focus could force her to talk about something that Farage rarely talks about, so at least makes her sound different. Fourth, it allows the Tories to poke at every budget adjustment and take advantage of the damage Trump and other geopolitical shitstorms are causing to the global economy. So the general strategy is a good one, but the individual tactics within that strategy are all terrible. Promising austerity on a scale that would have made Osborne think twice, that's not a good tactic. Badenoch will continue to be ridiculed by Labour for complaining about their increased spending without saying what she would cut. In fact, if Badenoch does insist on going ahead with this austerity plan, she not only risks just unpopularity with the voters, she's going to have to say what spending she will cut exactly. She's still being coy on that one. This is something even Farage struggles with. He's got big spending plans, so he says, unlike Badenoch, but Farage is unable to say how he'll pay for it either. Speaking of Farage, Badenoch has said her plan for him was the hope that the public would, in her words, tire of his bullshit. So her tactic for dealing with literally the greatest pull on her party's votes is to hope he messes up. I mean, he might. There's some unsurprising but interesting polling out there, which I may discuss at some point. And I've said before, there are headwinds coming Farage's way. There are little obstacles coming up for him in the next couple of years. But I think Badenoch may need a plan which goes beyond just hoping that the voters randomly see things her way all of a sudden. And this is also what I mean about my frustration with the quality of senior politicians these days. The leader of the Conservative Party, the single most successful political party in British history, and one of the most successful in world history. And her grand plan is to just sort of hope that voters one day wake up and decide to vote for her instead of the much more experienced and strategic Nigel Farage. But Badenoch is going to surely need something to sell to her party at the conference this autumn. Starmer will presumably be talking about the plans for the NHS, the Best Start centres, the impending improvements to renters and workers' rights, the funding for affordable and social housing, green energy projects and so on. Farage will be able to hail his party's consistent position at the top of the polls and talk about forming a government. What's Badenoch going to talk about? How's she going to promise mega austerity and just sort of hope Nigel Farage goes away? How's she going to spin that into a winning speech? But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.